The mountains held their breath. Somewhere in the Hindu Kush, beneath a sky the color of old bruises, 12 Navy SEALs pressed their backs against cold stone and waited to die. The Taliban had them. 3 sides, maybe 4. The radio crackled with the kind of static that sounds like prayers going unanswered. Team leader Mackenzie Reaper cross-keyed his mic twice, the universal signal for, "We're out of options." At Bagram Air Base, 200 miles northeast, the operations center erupted in controlled chaos. Screens glowed with thermal signatures, red dots swarming blue ones like blood cells attacking an infection. An Air Force colonel stared at the feed, jaw tight. They needed close air support. They needed it 5 minutes ago. Every available asset was committed. F-16s over Kandahar, Apache refueling, drones tracking another target package in Helmand. The duty officer's hand hovered over the emergency roster, then stopped. There was one name left, just one. He hesitated, not because of capability, because of politics, because of whispers, because 12 men were about to die and the only pilot available was the one everyone said couldn't handle it. He keyed the alert anyway. 30 seconds later, Captain Olivia Gravedigger Cade was sprinting across the tarmac toward an A-10 Thunderbolt II that looked like it had survived the apocalypse twice. Scarred titanium bathtub cockpit, nose art of a shovel wrapped in barbed wire. The GAU-8 Avenger cannon jutting from its belly like the fang of some prehistoric predator. She'd flown this bird through 3 deployments. It smelled like jet fuel, cordite, and vindication. Control spoke in her headset as she strapped in, voice flat with doubt. "Gravedigger, be advised, package is danger close. Multiple threats, high-value friendlies. Translation, don't screw this up." She didn't respond, just throttled up. The twin turbofans screamed to life and the A-10 shuddered forward like a feral animal released from a cage. 2 minutes to wheels up. 5 minutes to target. Somewhere in those mountains, men she'd never met were counting seconds they didn't have. She'd been counting too. Counting the number of times she'd been passed over for missions because someone decided a woman couldn't handle the pressure. Counting the jokes in the ready room. Counting the looks. The A-10 lifted off, nose angling toward the dark spine of Afghanistan, and Olivia Cade stopped counting everything except altitude, airspeed, and ammunition. The sky swallowed her whole. She remembered the first time someone called her Gravedigger, not as a compliment. Flight school 7 years back when she'd buried 3 simulated targets in a training run with such precision the instructor couldn't find fault but wouldn't give praise. A male classmate had smirked. "What are you, a gravedigger, just burying things and moving on?" The name stuck. She made sure it did, wore it like armor. Now the Hindu Kush rose ahead, jagged peaks clawing at thin air. Olivia pushed the A-10 low, threading through valleys where the altimeter screamed warnings and the terrain radar painted walls of granite close enough to touch. This was knife-fighting altitude. This was where the warthog lived. "Gravedigger, Reaper 6-1, how copy?" The SEAL team leader's voice cut through, tight with controlled panic. She could hear gunfire behind his words. "Reaper, Gravedigger, solid copy. 2 mics out. Send position." A grid coordinate spilled into her helmet. She punched it into the targeting computer, cross-referenced with thermal imaging. There. A narrow valley shaped like a broken tooth, heat signatures clustered at the southern end, friendlies, 12 souls packed behind inadequate cover. Around them, closing in, 40-plus enemy combatants moving with the confidence of wolves surrounding wounded prey. "Gravedigger, be advised, troops are within 70 meters of enemy positions. Request you hold fire until visual confirmation." 70 meters. In A-10 terms, that was threading a needle while riding a tornado. The GAU-8 fired depleted uranium rounds at 4,000 rounds per minute. Margin for error, none. She banked hard, felt the G-forces crush her into the seat, tasted copper. Below, the valley opened like a scar in the earth. She saw them. Muzzle flashes from Taliban positions in the rocks, RPG trails sketching white lines through the dust. And there, pressed against a cliff face, the SEALs. Surrounded, outgunned, waiting. "Reaper, Gravedigger has visual. Laser designate primary threat Western Ridge." A heartbeat. Then a thin green line stabbed upward from the SEAL position, touching a cluster of enemy fighters dug into elevated terrain. Perfect fields of fire, killing ground. She armed the cannon. The A-10 groaned, whole airframe shuddering as she rolled inverted, then pulled through, nose dropping toward the earth, airspeed building. The gun reticle drifted across her heads-up display, settling over the green sparkle of the laser. The world compressed into geometry, angle, speed, distance, consequence. Her finger tensed on the trigger. In Bagram, the operations center had gone silent. Everyone watching the feed, watching the unknown pilot, everyone had dismissed dive toward the mountains like a bullet with wings. The colonel's knuckles were white. Someone muttered a prayer. The GAU-8 Avenger spoke. Not a sound, a physical presence, a bass note felt in bones and belly. BRRRRRRRT. The cannon belched a stream of depleted uranium that carved through the morning air like God's own chainsaw. From the ground, it looked like a dragon's breath, a line of fire reaching down from the sky. Rock exploded. Dust erupted in a 50-meter curtain. The Taliban position on the western ridge ceased to exist, replaced by a crater and silence. Olivia pulled up airframe screaming, felt the stick shake in her hands. 6 Gs, 7. The mountains blurred. Then she was climbing, rolling, scanning for the next threat. Reaper, Gravedigger, Western Ridge neutralized. Call next target. The response came fast, breathless. North side, troops in the open, 150 meters. She banked left, spotted them. A dozen fighters sprinting across open ground, trying to flank. They'd expected air support to stay high, to drop bombs from safety. They hadn't expected a pilot insane enough to fly at treetop level through valleys that could swat aircraft like flies. She toggled to rockets. 70mm hydras, 7 tubes per pod, lined up the shot, fired. White contrails lanced downward, warheads impacting with surgical brutality, earth and flesh atomized. The Taliban advance crumbled. In the operations center, someone exhaled. The colonel leaned forward, eyes locked on the feed. Who is this pilot? The duty officer checked the roster again as if the name might have changed. Captain Cade, sir. Olivia Cade, call sign Gravedigger. Gravedigger, the colonel tested the word. On-screen, the A-10 rolled again, coming around for another pass. Low, so low its shadow raced across stone. How many combat hours? 473, sir. 3 deployments. 38 confirmed danger-close missions. The colonel's jaw tightened. He knew that number, knew what it meant. Every mission survived was a mission someone had doubted she could fly. Keep the feed open. Below, Reaper 6-1's voice crackled again. Gravedigger, your danger close. 50 meters, 50 meters. She didn't acknowledge, just flew. The valley walls blurred past, close enough to see individual rocks, shadows, the way sunlight caught on bullet casings scattered in the dirt. She spotted the next threat, enemy fighters setting up a mortar position, eastern slope, 300 meters from the SEALs. They were good, disciplined, already ranging their shots. She armed the cannon again. This time she came in from the side, vectoring through a gap in the terrain that shouldn't have been flyable. The A-10's wings flexed, hydraulics whined. Then she squeezed the trigger. The gun sang its brutal song. The mortar team vanished in a cloud of destruction. Olivia's hands moved on instinct, muscle memory carved from 1,000 hours in the cockpit. Pull up, roll right, scan, breathe. The adrenaline was there, always was, but underneath it ran something colder. Focus. The kind of focus that comes from being underestimated so often you stop caring what anyone thinks and start proving what you know. She'd learned that lesson young. Grew up in rural Montana, daughter of a crop duster pilot who taught her to fly before she could drive. Dead now 6 years. Crashed during a fire season run, smoke too thick, reaction too slow. She'd scattered his ashes from an open cockpit over the fields he'd loved. Became a pilot because of him, became Gravedigger because of everyone else. Gravedigger, Reaper, enemy forces regrouping, southern approach, they're trying to box us. She checked fuel, ammunition, both dwindling. The A-10 could loiter, could stay on station longer than anything else in the inventory, but physics had limits. She needed to make every pass count. Copy southern approach, stand by. She swung wide, using the valley terrain for concealment, then came screaming in from an angle that put the sun at her back. Below, Taliban fighters scrambled, trying to reposition. Too late. She walked the cannon fire across their formation like a conductor directing an orchestra of obliteration. Dust, fire, then nothing. The radio crackled. Gravedigger, Reaper 6-1. The team leader's voice had changed. No longer tight with panic, something else. "Oh, I don't know who you are, but you just saved 12 lives." She didn't respond immediately, too busy checking her six, scanning for anti-aircraft threats, calculating her next orbit. When she finally keyed the mic, her voice was level, professional. "Reaper, Gravedigger, job's not done. Still got threats in the area. Sit tight." In Bagram, the operations center had erupted in quiet activity. Officers leaning over monitors, pointing at the tactical display, tracing the A-10's flight path with something close to disbelief. The colonel stood with arms crossed, watching a pilot he'd never met fly a mission that was already being dissected in real time by every analyst in the room. "She's flying manually," someone said. "No autopilot, no computer assist, just hands-on stick and throttle. At that altitude, the colonel said nothing, just watched. On-screen, the A-10 carved through another turn, wings nearly vertical, then leveled out and made another gun run. Perfect, clinical, devastating. In the valley, the Taliban were learning a hard lesson. They'd thought they had the Americans trapped, thought the mountains were their fortress. They'd forgotten that some fortresses have doors, and sometimes those doors open to let monsters in. Olivia checked her ammunition counter. 300 rounds left. Enough for maybe 2 more solid bursts. The A-10 wasn't a precision instrument, it was a blunt weapon wrapped in titanium and spite. But in the right hands, in these hands, it was a scalpel. "Gravedigger, Reaper, I've got eyes on a heavy machine gun emplacement northeastern ridge. They're zeroing our position." She spotted it. Soviet-era DSHK, rust and history, but still deadly. 2 fighters manning it, others nearby with RPGs. That position had overlapping fields of fire, smart placement, dangerous. She armed her remaining Hydra rockets. 3 left, she'd used 2. The A-10 dropped lower, skimming terrain so close her altimeter warning blared continuously. Ignored it. Lined up the shot through a gap between 2 peaks that gave her maybe 4 seconds of firing window. 4 seconds. That's all combat ever was. Moments stitched together with violence and decision. Fired. Rockets streaked forward, contrails braiding in the thin air. Impact. The DSHK position erupted, metal and meat scattered across stone. Secondary explosion, probably ammunition cooking off. Orange fireball that climbed 50 feet, black smoke twisting into the sky. The remaining Taliban fighters broke. Started retreating up the valley, trying to put distance between themselves and the American position. Trying to escape the airplane that hunted them. She watched them run. Let them. Conserving ammunition now. The immediate threat was neutralized. Reaper 6-1 could breathe. "Reaper, Gravedigger, area secure, you're clear to move." "Copy, Gravedigger, we're displacing north. Extraction inbound, 15 mics, 15 minutes. She could stay that long. Fuel was running low but manageable. She established a lazy orbit pattern over the valley, circling like a raptor, making sure nothing else emerged from the rocks. Below, the SEALs moved fast, tactical spacing, weapons up. Professionals, they'd survived because of their training, their discipline, and because one pilot had been willing to fly into hell to pull them out. The radio crackled again. Different voice this time, younger. "Gravedigger, this is Reaper 6-4, just wanted to say," a pause like the words were hard to find. "That was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." She smiled behind her oxygen mask, not a big smile, just enough. "Reaper 6-4, Gravedigger, keep your head down and get home." "Roger that." "Hey, Gravedigger, send it. You ever need a beer, you got 11 guys who owe you one." 12, the team leader cut in. 12 guys. She didn't respond, just flew. The mountains stretched out below, ancient and indifferent. Somewhere in those rocks, men were carrying the weight of what they'd survived. She carried something else. Proof. The extraction helicopters appeared as dark specks against the northern sky, 2 Blackhawks flying nap of the earth, rotors chopping through thin air. Olivia watched them from 3,000 feet, circling high now, giving the valley one last scan. Nothing moved except wind and dust. The Taliban had learned. They'd retreated deep, melted back into the mountains like ghosts. Smart. She would have done the same. "Gravedigger, Python 1-3, we have visual on Reaper element. You're cleared off station. Thanks for the cleanup." The Blackhawk pilot's voice carried the easy confidence of someone who'd arrived after the shooting stopped. She keyed her mic. Python, Gravedigger, happy hunting. Winchester on gun, fuel at bingo, returning to base. Winchester, empty. Every bullet spent, every rocket fired. The A-10 was a stripped carcass now, nothing left but titanium and fumes. She turned northeast, let the mountains fall away behind her. The cockpit felt smaller somehow, quieter. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by exhaustion that settled into bones like cold water. She'd been airborne 43 minutes, felt like 43 hours. Bagram appeared on the horizon, a sprawl of concrete and dust, and American ambition carved into Afghan desert. She radioed the tower, got clearance, brought the A-10 in smooth. Wheels touched, reverse thrust engaged. The bird shuddered to a stop. She killed the engine. Silence. Real silence. The kind that follows violence. She sat there for a moment, hands still on the controls, feeling the residual vibration in the airframe, feeling her heartbeat slow. Then she popped the canopy. Afghan heat poured in, thick and oppressive. She climbed down, boots hitting tarmac, legs stiff from G-forces and tension. The ground crew was already approaching, but they'd stopped, standing there, staring. She pulled off her helmet, dark hair matted with sweat, and squinted against the sun. That's when she saw them. A crowd, growing, pilots, ground crew. Officers, someone had spread the word about the mission, about the pilot who'd flown into the mountains and pulled 12 men out of death's teeth, about Gravedigger. She walked toward the operations building, ignoring the eyes, but she couldn't ignore the colonel standing at the entrance, arms crossed, expression unreadable. He was older, 50-something, with the kind of weathered face that came from decades of sending people into danger. She stopped, saluted. He returned it slowly. Captain Cade. Sir. Hell of a mission. Just doing the job, sir. His jaw worked, like he was chewing words, trying to decide which ones to spit out. Finally, there are people in this squadron who said you weren't ready for missions like this. Said you didn't have the temperament, the judgment. She said nothing, just waited. They were wrong. He extended a hand. She shook it, firm, brief. You saved 12 lives today. That matters. Don't let anyone tell you different. Inside the operations center, the screens had been paused on the mission footage. Thermal images frozen mid-explosion, the A-10's flight path traced in yellow lines across a digital map. Officers stood in clusters, replaying segments, analyzing angles. They fell silent when Olivia entered. She ignored them, moved to the debrief station. A major she didn't recognize gestured to a chair. Captain, we'll need a full after-action report. Walk us through it. So she did. Every detail, every decision. The canyon approach, the danger-close gun runs, the ammunition count, the fuel management. As she talked, she watched their faces, saw the moment skepticism turn to understanding, saw them realize this hadn't been luck or accident, this had been skill, calculated, earned. When she finished, the room stayed quiet for a beat. Then the major nodded. Outstanding work, Captain. Textbook close air support. She stood. Respectfully, sir, it wasn't textbook. Textbook gets people killed. This was necessary. She left before they could respond. Outside, the sun was arcing toward afternoon. The tarmac shimmered with heat. Her A-10 sat near the hangar, ground crew swarming it, inspecting the undercarriage, counting bullet holes. There were 17 places where Taliban rounds had found metal and failed to punch through. The Warthog was built to take damage, built to protect the pilot, built to survive, like her. She walked to the bird, ran her hand along the scarred fuselage. Felt the warmth of friction-heated metal. This machine had carried her through hell. Again, would probably do it again tomorrow. A voice behind her. Captain Cade, she turned. A sergeant, young, holding a clipboard. Yes. Just got word from Task Force Reaper. They wanted me to pass along a message. She waited. The sergeant glanced at his notes, then back at her. They said, and I quote, Gravedigger is welcome in our house anytime. Drinks are on us, forever. She felt something crack in her chest. Not breaking, opening. Tell them I appreciate it. The sergeant hesitated. Ma'am, can I ask, why Gravedigger, the call sign? She looked back at her A-10, at the shovel painted on its nose, wrapped in barbed wire, at the scorched gun barrel that had spoken death into the mountains. Because, she said quietly, every mission I bury the things that need burying and I make sure they stay down. The sergeant nodded slowly. That's hardcore, ma'am. She almost smiled. That's the job. He left. She stayed, Stood there in the Afghan heat staring at her airplane, thinking about 12 men who'd get to see their families again. Thinking about all the times she'd been told she wasn't enough, wasn't strong enough, wasn't calm enough, wasn't male enough. Every one of those voices was quieter now. Not gone, never gone, but quieter. She'd silenced them the only way that mattered, by doing the work. That evening, Olivia sat alone in her quarters, a converted shipping container with a cot and a locker and walls thin enough to hear every conversation outside. She'd showered, changed into a clean flight suit, eaten something that tasted like cardboard and regret. Now she sat with a notebook, writing her personal log, not the official report, something else. The stuff that didn't fit in military documents, the way her hands had shaken after landing. The way she'd seen her father's face in the cockpit glass, just for a second when she'd rolled inverted over the valley. The way she'd felt 12 invisible threads connecting her to men she'd never met, binding her to their survival. She wrote until the words stopped coming, then closed the notebook. Put it in the locker next to a photograph, her and her dad, standing in front of his crop duster, both of them grinning like idiots. She was 16 in the photo. He'd let her take the controls for the first time that day. She'd been terrified and exhilarated and completely, utterly alive. Same feeling as today. A knock on the door, she opened it. Found 3 pilots from her squadron, 2 men, 1 woman. They'd flown with her before but never really talked. Never really acknowledged her as anything but the token female, the diversity checkbox, the pilot who got missions because of politics, not skill. Now they stood there looking awkward. The woman spoke first. "We heard about the mission, about what you did." Olivia leaned against the doorframe. "Yeah," one of the men nodded. "We wanted to say, that was solid, really solid." The other man cleared his throat. "Look, some of us have said things about you, about whether you should be flying combat. It was wrong." She studied them, saw genuine discomfort, genuine regret, not much, but something. "Okay," she said. The woman stepped forward. "We'd like to buy you a drink if you're up for it." Olivia considered. Part of her wanted to say no, wanted to close the door and sit with her father's photograph and not forgive anyone for anything. But another part, the part that remembered being 16 and afraid and doing it anyway, said something different. "1 drink," she said. "Then I'm calling it a night." They walked together to the rec area, a plywood building with folding chairs and a contraband beer fridge that everyone pretended didn't exist. Word about the mission had spread. When Olivia entered, conversations paused. Heads turned. Then someone started clapping, slow at first, then others joined. Within seconds, the whole room was applauding. She stood there, frozen, unsure how to process this. Validation she'd never asked for but desperately needed. Recognition earned in fire and blood. She nodded, just once. Then moved to the back, took a chair, accepted a beer. The woman pilot sat beside her. "How'd you stay so calm?" "I watched the gun camera footage." "You were threading needles." Olivia took a long pull from the beer, considered the question. "You know what my dad used to say, fear is just information, it tells you what matters, so you listen, you process, then you do the work anyway." The woman nodded slowly. "Your dad was a pilot, crop duster, Montana, best stick I ever saw." She paused. "He taught me that flying isn't about being fearless. It's about being more committed to the mission than you are to your own comfort." Across the room, someone had pulled up the mission footage on a laptop. A cluster of pilots gathered around, watching the A-10 dive into the valley, watching the gun runs, the precision, the brutality. Olivia heard their murmurs. "Jesus, look at that angle. She's barely 50 feet off the deck. That's not flying, that's controlled falling." One of the pilots turned, spotted her, raised his beer. "Gravedigger, you're insane." She raised hers back. Didn't disagree. Insane, maybe. Or maybe just tired of being dismissed. Tired of being the exception, the asterisk, the pilot who only got respect after proving herself in ways male pilots never had to. She'd learned early that competence wasn't enough. You had to be twice as good to be considered half as capable, so she'd become 3 times as good. And today that had mattered. The evening wore on. Conversations flowed. Pilots swapped stories, compared notes, argued about tactics. Olivia listened more than she talked. Let the noise wash over her. Somewhere around midnight, the crowd thinned. She was getting ready to leave when the colonel appeared in the doorway. The room snapped to attention. He waved them down. "As you were." His eyes found Olivia. Captain Cade, a word. They stepped outside. The night was cool, desert temperature plummeting after sunset. Stars overhead like shattered glass on black velvet. The colonel lit a cigarette, offered her one. She declined. "I've been in the Air Force 32 years," he said, smoke curling from his lips. "Seen a lot of pilots, good ones, bad ones, lucky ones." He took another drag. "What you did today, that wasn't luck, that was mastery." She didn't know what to say, so she said nothing. "There's going to be an investigation," he continued. "Standard procedure for danger close mission. They'll pick apart every decision, every maneuver, looking for mistakes." Her stomach tightened. "Understood, sir." He looked at her directly. "They won't find any because you flew a perfect mission, but they'll look anyway because some people can't accept that you're just better than they expected." He dropped the cigarette, crushed it under his boot. "Don't let them grind you down. The mission speaks for itself. 12 men alive, that's all that matters." He started to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, Captain, if I ever need someone to pull my ass out of the fire, I hope it's you." He disappeared into the darkness. Olivia stood alone under the stars, feeling the weight of the day settle over her like a blanket. Exhaustion, pride, fear, relief, all of it swirling together. The investigation took 3 weeks. Olivia spent that time flying routine patrols, training sorties, anything to keep her hands on the stick and her mind off the bureaucratic machine dissecting her mission. They interviewed everyone. Reaper 6-1 and his team, flown in from their forward base. The operations center staff. The ground crew. The other pilots. They studied gun camera footage frame by frame, analyzed fuel consumption, cross-referenced radio communications with flight data. Looking for the flaw, the mistake, the evidence that would prove she'd been reckless, lucky, or both. They found nothing because there was nothing to find. On a Tuesday afternoon, she was summoned to the colonel's office. She walked in, stood at attention. He gestured to a chair. She sat. "Investigations closed," he said. "Findings, mission conducted within acceptable parameters. No violations, no negligence." He slid a folder across the desk. "They're recommending you for the Distinguished Flying Cross." She stared at the folder, didn't touch it. The Distinguished Flying Cross. Heroism or extraordinary achievement in flight. A decoration that mattered, that meant something. "Sir, You earned it, Captain. Don't diminish that by pretending you didn't." She picked up the folder, opened it. Read the citation. Dry military language describing things that had felt like chaos and poetry. For extraordinary achievement while participating in aerial flight. Under heavy enemy fire. Displaying exceptional airmanship and courage. Directly resulting in the preservation of friendly forces. Words that tried to capture what couldn't be captured. The feeling of diving into that valley. The weight of 12 lives. The knowledge that failure meant body bags and notification officers and families destroyed. She closed the folder. "Thank you, sir." "Don't thank me, thank yourself. You did the work." He leaned back. "There's something else. Task Force Reaper is requesting you for future operations." Specifically by name, she looked up. "Sir. They want Gravedigger on speed dial, said they trust you more than they trust God." A smile ghosted across his face. "I told them we'd consider it." He paused. "What do you think?" She thought about those mountains. The valley shaped like a broken tooth. The sound of the GAU-8 tearing air apart. The voices on the radio, panic, then relief, then gratitude. She thought about her father, about the crop duster spiraling into Montana earth. About all the reasons she'd become a pilot and all the reasons she stayed one. "I think," she said slowly, "that's what I'm here for." The colonel nodded. "Good, because they need people who can do what you do, who can fly into hell and bring people home." He stood, extended his hand again. "Welcome to the Brotherhood, Captain. You've earned your place." She shook, felt the calluses on his palm, the grip of someone who understood weight. "One more thing," he added. "Your call sign, Gravedigger. Some of the brass think it's too dark, too aggressive. They're suggesting we change it." Her jaw tightened. "Sir, I told them to go to hell." He smiled, genuine. "You picked that name for a reason. You've made it mean something. Keep it." Word spread fast. Within a week, every special operations unit in theater knew about Gravedigger. The A-10 pilot who flew into the Hindu Kush and dismantled a Taliban ambush like she was brushing dust off a shelf. Requests started coming in. Army Rangers in Paksha needed CAS. Green Berets in Kunar wanted her on standby. Even Delta was asking questions. Olivia flew them all. mission after mission. Some were textbook, ordnance on target, enemies neutralized, friendlies safe. Others were knife fights, the kind where she came back with new holes in the airframe and empty ammunition bins. Every time she brought people home. The A-10 became legend. The bird with the shovel painted on its nose, with the pilot who didn't flinch, didn't hesitate, didn't quit. Ground troops started calling her something else. Not Gravedigger, Guardian Angel. She heard it on the radio sometimes. A grunt in contact calling for support. Any chance we can get Guardian Angel? Or a JTAC coordinating fires. Tell Gravedigger we need her. Tell the Angel we're in trouble. She never corrected them. Names were earned, both names, Gravedigger for the enemy, Guardian Angel for the friendlies, two sides of the same coin. 6 months after the Hindu Kush mission, she was sitting in the operations center when a new request came through. Marine recon pinned down near the Pakistani border. Heavy contact, casualties. They needed immediate air support. The duty officer scanned the roster, then looked at her. "You're up, Captain. If you're ready," she stood, always ready. 30 minutes later, she was airborne. The mission was bad from the start. Weather rolling in, low clouds shrouding the mountains, visibility minimal. The Marines were in a box canyon surrounded on 3 sides. Taliban had them zeroed. They were taking casualties, bleeding, dying. She pushed through the weather, flying on instruments, trusting her gauges and her instincts. Broke through the cloud deck at 800 feet, saw the canyon carved into the earth below. Saw muzzle flashes, smoke. The terrible geometry of a trap sprung perfectly. Gravedigger, Viper 2-1, we're combat ineffective. We need immediate support. The Marine's voice was young, scared, trying not to show it. Viper, Gravedigger's inbound, 30 seconds. Mark your position with IR strobe. A flicker of infrared light appeared below, visible only through her night vision. The Marines. Right in the center of the kill box, she armed everything. Gun, rockets, whatever it took. The A-10 dropped into the canyon like a stone, terrain screaming past, walls close enough to see bullet scars on ancient rock. This was tighter than the Hindu Kush, tighter than anything she'd flown. No room for error, only commitment. The gun reticle settled over the first enemy position. She fired. The canyon filled with thunder. The GAU-8's roar echoed off the canyon walls, amplified, bouncing back and forth until it sounded like the world was ending. In a way, it was, for the Taliban fighters at least. Olivia walked the fire across their positions with surgical precision, watching impacts through the targeting pod. Rock and flesh vaporized. Equipment disintegrated. The tide of the fight shifted in seconds. Viper 2-1, Gravedigger, western positions neutralized, regrouping for second pass. Gravedigger, your danger close, 20 meters. 20 meters, that was nothing. That was margin of error. That was the difference between salvation and catastrophe. She banked hard, felt the airframe protest, ignored it. Came around from a different angle, using the canyon's natural curves to mask her approach. Below, Taliban fighters were scrambling, trying to reposition, trying to escape the angel of death that had appeared in their sky. She gave them no quarter. Rockets streaked down, impacting with precision that defied the chaos. Secondary explosions bloomed, ammunition cooking off, vehicles burning. The Marines began returning fire, seizing the initiative, pushing back. Gravedigger, Viper, we're mobile. You just saved our asses. She didn't respond. Too busy scanning for remaining threats. Too busy making sure every Marine in that canyon lived to see morning. The mission lasted 18 minutes. When she finally pulled off station, her hands were cramping on the stick and her oxygen mask was soaked with sweat. The A-10 climbed out of the canyon, rose through the clouds, emerged into clear sky where stars waited like witnesses. The radio crackled. Gravedigger, Viper 2-1. Different voice now. Older, the unit commander. I want you to know something. My Marines are going home because of you. Every single one. I won't forget that. She keyed her mic. Voice steady despite the exhaustion. Viper, Gravedigger, it's what we do. Stay safe out there. She turned toward Bagram. Let the mountains fall away. Thought about the Marines in that canyon. Thought about the SEALs in the Hindu Kush. Thought about all the people she'd pulled from the edge. This was the job. This was why she wore the uniform. Not for the medals. Not for the recognition. For the moments when someone looked up at the sky and saw hope instead of death. For the times when 12 men or 15 or 20 got to go home because she'd been there. The A-10 flew on through the darkness, scarred and empty and unbroken, like the woman who piloted it. Back at base, the ground crew counted 23 new bullet holes, a record. The crew chief whistled low. "Captain, one of these days your luck's gonna run out." Olivia walked past, already thinking about the next mission. "It's not luck, Chief, it's titanium and attitude," he laughed. "You're crazy, ma'am." She paused, looked back. "Maybe, but I'm alive, and so are they." That night she wrote in her journal again, wrote about the canyon, the Marines, the feeling of flying through clouds with nothing but instinct and prayer. She wrote about fear, too, because it was always there. Anyone who said they weren't afraid was lying or dead. The trick was carrying it without letting it steer. Her father had taught her that. She wished he could see this, see what she'd become. Then again, maybe he could. Maybe he was there in the cockpit every time she rolled inverted, every time she dived into fire, every time she proved that the girl from Montana who learned to fly in a crop duster could stand alongside anyone. The distinguished flying cross ceremony happened on a Thursday. Gray sky, wind kicking dust across the tarmac. Olivia stood at attention in her dress blues while the colonel pinned the medal to her chest. Small piece of metal that weighed nothing and everything. Around her the squadron stood in formation, watching, some with pride, some with envy, some still processing the idea that the pilot they dismissed was now the one being decorated. The citation was read aloud, her actions in the Hindu Kush. The 12 lives saved, the extraordinary achievement. When it finished, applause rippled through the crowd. She didn't smile, just saluted crisp and professional, then returned to formation. Later at the reception, people clustered around her, offering congratulations, asking questions, wanting to be associated with success now that it was official. She answered politely, stayed 15 minutes, then excused herself. Outside, she found Reaper 6-1 waiting. The SEAL team leader who'd called for help that day in the mountains. They'd flown him in for the ceremony. He wasn't in uniform, just jeans and a casual shirt, but he carried himself with the unmistakable bearing of a warrior. "Captain Cade." He extended his hand. She shook it. "You didn't have to come." "Yeah, I did." He glanced at the medal on her chest. "That piece of metal doesn't come close to what you did, but it's a start." They stood in silence for a moment. Two people who'd shared something most never would, a brush with mortality, a moment where everything hung on skill and chance and will. "My daughter was born 3 months ago," he said quietly. "First kid, she's everything." His voice caught. "I got to be there, got to hold her because you flew into that valley." Olivia felt something tighten in her throat. "What's her name?" "Olivia," he smiled. "After you, figured it was appropriate." She didn't trust herself to speak, just nodded. He pulled something from his pocket, a small patch, the SEAL trident but modified, wings added to the sides, hand-stitched. "The team wanted you to have this. You're one of us now, honorary." She took it, felt the weight. "I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything, just keep flying. Keep being the person who shows up when everything's gone to hell." He clapped her shoulder, then walked away. Olivia stood there holding the patch, staring at the modified trident, thinking about a baby girl in America named after a pilot her father met in the mountains of Afghanistan, thinking about legacy, about the things that mattered beyond medals and mission reports. That night, she sewed the patch into the inside pocket of her flight suit, over her heart, where it would stay, a reminder, not of what she'd done, but of why she kept doing it. The missions continued. Weeks blurred into months. Summer heat gave way to winter cold. The war ground on as wars do, indifferent to seasons, indifferent to everything except blood and will. Olivia flew, again and again, into valleys and over ridges and through weather that should have kept aircraft grounded. She brought people home, every time. By the time her deployment ended, Olivia had logged 647 combat hours, 53 danger-close missions, 4 Air Medals, the Distinguished Flying Cross, 2 Air Force Commendation Medals, and a reputation that preceded her into every ready room, every briefing, every conversation. She was Gravedigger, guardian angel, the pilot who didn't quit. When she rotated stateside, back to Nevada, back to the training squadrons and the peacetime routine, something felt wrong. The missions were safe, controlled, sanitized. No one was dying if she made a mistake. No one was depending on her for their next breath. She flew well, taught well, but the fire had dimmed. The younger pilots looked at her with a mixture of awe and distance. She was the veteran, the combat-tested ace. The woman who'd done things they'd only read about. They asked her questions. She answered. But there was a gap now, between those who'd been there and those who hadn't. Between those who knew what the GAU-8 sounded like when you fired it at danger-close range and those who only knew simulators. 6 months stateside. Then the call came. Colonel's voice on the phone, direct. "Captain Cade, how would you feel about another deployment?" She didn't hesitate. "When do I leave?" 30 days, back to Bagram. Task Force needs a dedicated CAS pilot. They requested you specifically. "I'll be ready." She hung up, stared at the wall of her apartment, at the photographs. Her and her father, the SEAL Trident patch framed now. The mission patches from her previous deployment, the Distinguished Flying Cross citation. This was who she was, not the woman trying to fit into peacetime, the woman who flew into fire, the woman who brought people home. 30 days later, she was back in Afghanistan. Same mountains, same war. Different faces maybe, but the same fight. She reported to the operations center, met the new colonel, younger than the last, but with the same hard eyes of someone who'd made too many difficult calls. "Captain Cade," he shook her hand. "Heard a lot about you. Good things, I hope, sir. The kind of things that matter." He gestured to the tactical map on the wall. "We've got operations spinning up across 3 provinces. High tempo, high risk. We need someone who can respond immediately, who can fly into situations that would ground most pilots." He looked at her directly. "That's you." "Yes, sir. Your A-10's being prepped now. Same bird you flew last deployment. Ground crew kept it reserved for you." She felt something settle, like pieces clicking back into place. "Thank you, sir." "Don't thank me. Thank the operators who refuse to go out without knowing you're on call." He handed her a radio frequency card. "This is the direct line to task force operations. Encrypted. Priority access. Anything comes through, your wheels up in 5 minutes." She took it. "Understood. One more thing." He paused. "There's a lot of brass who still don't like the idea of women in combat roles, who think this is a publicity stunt. You know that, right?" "Yes, sir. Prove them wrong again." She smiled, small, sharp. "Every day, sir." The operations came fast, faster than her first deployment. The Taliban had adapted, gotten bolder, learned the Americans' patterns. They struck hard, faded fast, used terrain like a weapon, but they hadn't adapted to Gravedigger. 3 weeks in, a Ranger platoon made contact in Lagar province. Heavy ambush. They needed CAS immediately. Olivia was airborne in 4 minutes. Found them pinned down in an irrigation ditch, taking fire from multiple positions. No easy approach. No safe angle. So she made an unsafe one. Came in so low the A-10's belly scraped tree branches. Fired the gun in bursts, walking rounds across enemy positions with precision born from muscle memory and necessity. The Rangers broke contact, extracted with no additional casualties. The platoon leader sent a message through channels. "Tell Gravedigger she's got free beer for life if she ever comes through Fort Benning." A week later, Green Berets in Wardak. A month after that, Polish GROM near Ghazni. Then Australian SAS, British SBS. Elite operators from a dozen nations, all fighting the same war, all learning the same lesson. When things went bad, you wanted Gravedigger overhead. The missions blurred together, not because they weren't important, because they were all the same at the core. Someone in trouble, someone who needed help, and her flying into the gap between life and death. The A-10 absorbed damage like a sponge. Bullet holes patched, hydraulic lines replaced, avionics repaired. The ground crew stopped counting, just fixed what broke and sent her back up. The bird was as much a legend as the pilot now, scarred titanium and defiance. "Captain, at some point we're gonna run out of patches for this thing," the crew chief said one morning, surveying fresh damage from a mission the night before. Olivia ran her hand along the fuselage, felt the rivets, the repairs, the history written in metal. "Keep patching, Chief. We're not done yet." He laughed. "Ma'am, with respect, you're insane." "I've been told." 7 months into the deployment, Olivia was sitting in the operations center reviewing mission footage when the alarm sounded. Not a drill, real world. "Gravedigger, we've got a mass casualty event. IED strike on a convoy in Nangarhar. Multiple wounded. Medevac inbound, but they're taking fire on approach. We need you to clear the LZ. She was moving before the briefing finished. Running across the tarmac, flight suit already on, helmet in hand. The A-10 was prepped. Always prepped. She climbed in, strapped down, started engines. The turbofan spooled up with a shriek. Tower gave her immediate clearance. She was airborne in 90 seconds. Nangarhar, eastern Afghanistan, near the Pakistani border, terrain like broken teeth, valleys like scars. The convoy had been hit hard. She could see smoke from 30 miles out. As she approached, the tactical picture came together. Convoy disabled, multiple vehicles burning, wounded scattered, and Taliban fighters closing in, trying to finish the job before help arrived. The medevac helicopters were orbiting 3 miles out, too dangerous to land. She keyed her radio. Dustoff 6-7, Gravedigger inbound, give me 60 seconds. Gravedigger, Dustoff, they've got us bracketed, can't approach. Stand by. She dropped into the valley like a meteor, screaming down through thin air. She spotted the Taliban positions, dug into ridges overlooking the convoy. Perfect ambush site. They'd planned this well, didn't matter. She armed the gun. The first pass cleared the northern ridge. The GAU-8 spoke its terrible truth, and the Taliban position evaporated in a curtain of dust and destruction. Olivia pulled up hard, rolled, came back from a different vector. These weren't just gun runs anymore. This was art. Brutal, violent art. She'd flown so many missions that they felt like an extension of her body. She didn't think about stick inputs, didn't calculate angles, just flew. Her second pass targeted the eastern positions. Rockets this time, 7-shot ripple that walked across the ridgeline like the fingers of an angry god. Explosions bloomed orange against gray rock. The Taliban fire slackened, then stopped. Dustoff 6-7, Gravedigger, LZ is clear, you're good to land. Copy, Gravedigger, moving in now. She established a high orbit, watching the medevac birds descend. Black hawks with red crosses landing in the debris field. Medics poured out, moving fast, loading wounded. Olivia scanned the surrounding terrain, waiting, watching, daring anything to move. Nothing did. The valley stayed quiet, beaten. 10 minutes later, the helicopters lifted off, wounded aboard. The convoy's survivors consolidated, preparing for recovery. Crisis averted. Lives saved. Gravedigger, Dustoff 6-7, we're clear, thanks for the cover. She didn't respond immediately. Too busy thinking about the wounded soldiers in those helicopters. About how close they'd come to dying in a valley that would have forgotten them by tomorrow. About how many times she'd done this. How many lives balanced on the edge of her skill. Finally, she keyed the mic. Dustoff, Gravedigger, safe flight home. The helicopters disappeared over the horizon. Olivia turned back toward Bagram, fuel gauge reading low. Another mission complete. Another day in the war. That evening in her quarters, she received a message through official channels from the convoy commander. Brief. Simple. You saved 19 soldiers today. Their families will never know your name, but I will. Thank you, Gravedigger. She read it twice. Folded the paper, put it in her locker with all the others. Dozens of them now. Notes from people whose lives she'd touched. Rangers, SEALs, Marines. Soldiers from countries she'd never visited. All saying the same thing in different words. Thank you, you saved us. We owe you everything. She didn't keep them for pride. She kept them for the hard days. The days when doubt crept in. When exhaustion made her question if any of this mattered. On those days, she read the notes. Remembered the faces she'd never seen. The voices on the radio. The people who went home because she'd been there. That night, lying in her cot, staring at the metal ceiling of her container, she thought about her father. About the crop duster spiraling down. About how he'd spent his life flying low, spraying fields, keeping the world fed in his small way. He'd never fought in a war. Never fired a weapon. Never saved lives in the way she did. But he'd taught her to fly. Taught her that fear was just information. Taught her to be more committed to the mission than to her own comfort. Everything else had grown from those seeds. She fell asleep thinking about Montana. About wide skis and wheat fields. About a girl learning to fly in her father's airplane, not knowing that someday she'd take those lessons and forge them into something sharp enough to cut through the darkness. The deployment pushed into a second year, extensions approved. Need too great, too many operations requiring her specific skill set. Olivia became a permanent fixture at Bagram. The pilot who never left, the angel who never slept. Mission tempo increased. The Taliban were pushing back hard, knowing American forces would eventually withdraw. Desperation made them bold, made them vicious. Olivia met that desperation with something colder: professional violence. The kind that didn't waste bullets or fury, just results. She flew through sandstorms, through electrical storms that turned the sky into a weapon, through mountain passes where the A-10's wings flexed and groaned and somehow held together. The airplane was falling apart, literally, structural fatigue from the constant stress, combat damage accumulating faster than repairs could manage. The crew chief finally pulled her aside one morning. "Captain, we need to ground this bird. She's done. We're holding her together with prayers and speed tape." Olivia looked at the A-10. Her A-10, the bird that had carried her through hell and back, multiple hells. She could see the exhaustion in the airframe, the way certain panels didn't quite fit anymore, the hydraulic fluid stains that never dried, the patches on patches. "How long until you can get a replacement?" The chief shook his head. "Replacement? Ma'am, this is an A-10. They stopped making these in '84. We've got spare parts, but—" He trailed off. "But nothing flies like this one," Olivia finished. "No, ma'am, nothing flies like this one." She made a decision, probably the wrong one, definitely the dangerous one. "Keep her flying, Chief. Do whatever you have to do. I need her." He looked at her, saw the determination, the stubbornness, the refusal to let go. "Yes, ma'am, but if this bird falls out of the sky, it won't." "How do you know?" She smiled, tired, real. "Because she knows I'm not done yet." The chief shook his head but started working, reinforcing, patching, keeping the legend alive. One more day, one more mission. Olivia's year mark came and went, then 18 months. The other pilots rotated home. New faces arrived, looked at her with confusion. The veteran who wouldn't leave, the pilot who'd become part of the landscape. She didn't explain, didn't justify, just flew. Some nights she'd sit outside her quarters and stare at the mountains, dark shapes against darker sky. She'd lost count of how many times she'd flown into those mountains, how many valleys she knew by heart, how many ridges she could navigate blind. Afghanistan had become familiar, not home, never home, but something else, a place where she made sense, where her purpose was clear, where doubt couldn't touch her because the missions were too real, the stakes too high. A psychologist visited the base, mandatory mental health screening. Olivia sat across from him, answered questions. Yes, she was sleeping. Yes, she was eating. No, she wasn't experiencing nightmares. The psychologist leaned back. "Captain, your deployment's been extended 5 times. That's unusual. Most pilots would have requested rotation stateside by now." "I'm not most pilots." "I can see that." He studied her. "Can I ask why you keep extending?" She considered the question. How to explain the weight of competence, the burden of being the best at something that mattered. "Because people live when I'm here," she said finally. "And they might die if I'm not." The psychologist nodded slowly. "That's a heavy responsibility to carry." "Yes." "Do you ever think about what happens when you leave, when you finally go home?" She'd thought about it, late at night, in the quiet moments between missions. The truth was, she didn't know how to go home, didn't know who she'd be in a world without the radio crackling with desperate voices and the A-10's controls in her hand.